So this is the second virtual JavaScript meeting that I have hosted. We did start this over lockdown and it went really, really well. But then as things went on with the market and everything on iOS side, we kind of let it go a bit and just focused on making sure that our candidates and clients had, roles and candidates for their jobs. But now we've had a bit more time and the team's grown a bit. He'll introduce you to later. We figured it was a good time to get back up and running. So I guess, first of all, like a big thank you for everyone to come along. And we will be discussing with Derek Binkley from Localize in the USA about how do we make our new features and our software design accessible and good for our end users. I think a lot of the time when big tech companies and small tech companies think about like what should we do different and what should we add to our software, they often think big and great and have the most different thing out there on the market. But realistically, what the end user actually wants is something that just actually works for the candidate. So Derek is going to be talking some more about that. And just briefly, I want to introduce, there's a few people on this call from, there's Callum, Jagdeep, Fraser, Mason, and Connor, who are all the iAssociates JavaScript team. So we are going to be listening adamantly and yeah, hopefully learning a lot. So over to Derek.
Great. Well, thank you, Caitlin, for the introduction, and all of our IO associates for inviting me here. And you are seeing my slides, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I am just going to, yes, yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm not seeing the chat right now, but I think it'll pop up if you do have questions. Otherwise, we can chat more about it after the talk. So this talk that I'm giving today is about, like Caitlin said, about thinking about your users first. I called it, this is not something I came up with. I don't remember where I heard it, but just a user first approach to software design. And I called it, I gave the main title, Pardon the Disruption, because I've often kind of struggled with the term that we use in software. Other industries use it as well. When we talk about disrupting industries, I mean, that I see the benefits and, creating like really great things and really, monumental, revolutionary new products. But a lot of the times, we're iterating on our products little by little, and what's best for our users isn't necessarily, a disruption, but it's actually something, just something useful. So yeah, I'm just going to be talking about some ideas that I've come up with my 20, oh goodness, I guess it's almost 25 years in software that I've been, and I am based in Madison, Wisconsin, which is in the north central section of the USA, kind of the Great Lakes area. If you know anything about NBA basketball or NFL football, you might know Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, or the Green Bay Packers. So that can give you a sense of how sports crazy we are in my state here. So, but that's oh yeah, and I'm an engineering lead at a company called Localize, and I'll just some of the anecdotes will be about about my my work there. What we do is we do translation management systems. So we help particularly software companies, but basically anybody with anything electronic like a website or documents, we help them get it translated. We don't do the translations, we do the software. So and I've been there since it's coming up on a year. So not too long, but it's been a great experience so far. So anyway, the first story I want to share with you, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I'm not sure if Girl Scouts are a thing in England, and if they are, I'm not sure if you if the Girl Scouts sell Girl Scout cookies, because but in the United States, so I think that in the US, this is a big deal for the Girl Scouts. Basically this one sale funds like their entire year of activities, as well as like, charity work that they do, as well as, trips that they might take, camping, or my daughter in her senior year, she went to New York City on the train. So that was, kind of a big deal. But they do this fundraising by selling cookies, and people get excited about this because, there's cookies that you only get a certain time of year, and it's really a big deal. But about maybe 10 years ago, they made a change. And it's not a software change, but you'll see why I'm bringing this up in a minute. They made a change so that instead of just taking an order form to your neighbors and then getting orders, we actually get the cookies ahead of time. So you're there with the cookies, and you probably sell more if you have cookies in hand versus, getting them to sign up for, getting the cookies 6 weeks later, and then, but paying for it now, kind of thing. So, but the problem with this was that it put the risk of the sales onto the Girl Scouts, and the troops. Because before, if somebody's check bounced, or, the payment didn't come through or whatever, you had that up front. If the check bounced, it was the big, global, Girl Scouts who would eat that cost. But now it's like, girls and their parents are going to suddenly eating these costs. So they had to become like little, like do their own marketing research and say, okay, well, last year we sold 150 cookies. This year I'm going to try to sell 180. That's how I know I'll order. But if they only sell 120, they're stuck with 60 boxes of cookies that they have to sell, and they're not going to get a profit to, until they sell those. So that, and it actually, it actually worked. That system worked pretty well, until we hit the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, what happened last year is no indication of what's going to happen the next year. So, so DoorDash is a delivery company. I don't know if they're global or if they're just in the US, but they decided to help out. And but their help necessarily wasn't super well thought out, because what they did is they got priority with the supply chain issues. So troops that sold the cookies through DoorDash had the benefit. They didn't have to go out there in the pandemic and, deliver cookies and, try to like sit outside a grocery store and that kind of thing. It was really useful for some troops, but other groups of girls, like all of a sudden, like either they ordered hundreds of boxes and they never got them, or they ordered hundreds of boxes and they couldn't sell them because DoorDash was eating those, was taking over that. So yeah, it was kind of this was really an unexpected side effect to some changes that people thought were, oh yeah, why wouldn't this be a good thing? And so you'll kind of see that as a recurring theme throughout my talk today, where things are, what we think might work, we need to think twice about it. So this is just, I'm sure you see these a lot. Your website pops up something and says, hey, you get 20% off if you enter your mobile number. This looks great. The problem is that, yes, you are going to collect some information, but in some surveys, 82% of people hate those type of collection pop-ups. So I'm not saying don't do them. My advice here isn't, do this or don't do that. It's think about why you're doing it. And if you actually look at some of these case studies that I got off of g2.com that I read through, where they said, okay, 82% of these people hate it. Well, yes, but if you're smarter about the collection of it and only if you think a little bit more about when you ask for the email or when you display the coupon, then you get a much higher rate of people actually submitting their information. And they don't just say, oh, I don't even know if I want to buy on this site. I'm just going to, click out of it. So just kind of like thinking through those things about what is it like for your user to have that suddenly like pop up all of a sudden. Do they know at that point that they want to purchase on your site? Is this a helpful coupon? And those kind of things. I think another major annoyance on websites is when, videos start playing. Especially, you're looking at it on a mobile device or, your iPad, and then like, I don't know how many times I've helped a relative, like, try to like, get a video to stop, to stop playing. They're like, I don't know why it's doing this. And this is actually, this example that I found here was this video that's playing. It's not actually, I mean, it's sort of related because it's also about a Ford truck. And this is about a Ford electric cars and new chargers. So kind of totally different topics, but they're just only tangentially related. So why is this video playing? Like what do you want your users to do? I refer to some of these things as, either design smells, it doesn't smell right to me. Like, and one thing on this site is you have multiple calls to action. Like, what do you want your user to do? Do you want them to read this article? Do you want them to watch this video? And so, thinking about like that and making sure, thinking about the user's perspective again and saying, oh, yeah, what do we want them to do? Maybe we can guide them to that. What is going to, bring in their attention or get them to click on an ad or whatever it is you're trying to do. And then, demanding their attention is often, can backfire, where you're saying, oh, watch this video. And then all of a sudden, they get upset and then they just close the site because they didn't want that. So those are just some kind of basic ideas. And I know that a lot of us the software that we build doesn't, isn't like life or death critical. But as we automate more and more of our world, it's starting to become where there's a lot of stuff that is life or death situations, or at least can greatly affect someone's quality of life, whether or not our product works properly or is designed well for them. So then the next story is kind of a downer, and I debated whether or not I should talk about it because it's not fun, but there's so many good lessons in it. I thought I'd go ahead and keep it in. This is a case that happened. I mean, this news report was in March of this year, but I think that that was at the end of the court case. So basically, yeah, so it involves this nurse who was found guilty in accidentally giving the wrong medicine to a patient who then died. And then so now she's in prison and the patient is dead. This is a really horrible, like this is, probably one of the worst possible outcomes for a software failure. And why I say this was a software failure is because it involves a device like this. I don't know if this is the exact one. I didn't do that much research, but it's something like this where a nurse has to go to a console, like log in, get some information, put the patient's information in and say which medicine they're going to take out, and then take out that medicine before they administer to the patient. Now that sounds actually like, well, yeah, that sounds like it's going to help. It's going to make it easier. But there were a number of problems in this case. In this case, the nurse, not only was she understaffed, so she was working like, extremely tired. She was also, there were some like, I don't know if they call them interns or new nurses or, whatever, but there are a lot of people asking her for information. So she was trying to, get this injection ready, but at the same time, typing stuff into this computer to make sure that it's the right information, the right prescription. And then, people are asking her questions. So she's responding to stuff. So she's not giving the software her full attention. And so that's kind of where some of the problems lied, because one of the things is that she had to override the system to get this medicine, because this system was saying, no, don't give this information, are you sure this could be dangerous, are you really sure? But the problem is that, as this quote says, another overriding the system was something they did every day. They couldn't get a bag of fluids, like something very simple for their patient, without overriding. So all of a sudden, when you make error messages, something that is just routine, they lose their value. It's just as bad as, it's almost, maybe it's even worse than having no error messages, because when you actually do, it's like the boy who cried wolf story. It's the computer that cried an error message. If it keeps saying, okay, there's an error, this is wrong, it's the computer is teaching you to ignore those errors, which can have, in this case, had a very deadly consequence. Another thing that came up with this case is that another nurse, or I guess someone who works with the nurses, says this is a medication that you should never ever be able to override to. It's probably the most dangerous medication out there. And part of the problem was that, and you may ask, well, why did she get the wrong medicine? And I left that part of the story out. So what she was doing was she started typing the name of the medicine, but she was using the generic name, but the software was only coded to the brand name, or vice versa. And so it just turned out that what she started typing turned out to be very similar to this very horrible medication that should only be given in very, very limited conditions, versus something that was just like an antibiotic that is given all the time. And so that's actually another problem that this system had, is that it was expecting, it was expecting the nurse, who is like distracted and tired and has so much going on. It was expecting her to know, okay, I need to type this in this way. It was expecting precision out of her. It was expecting knowledge. Now, who would you think is better at getting, indexing, thousands and thousands of medications and cross-referencing them with names, a person or a computer? I mean, in theory, it should be the computer. How it should be easy, relatively straightforward, at least, to, add in those extra names and, guide the user. So like, oh, you're typing this. Yeah, I understand that is also this other, is also known by this other name, rather than the person having to say, okay, I know, I need to know this specific information. So, so those are, with this system, I would say some of the smells that I identified was, routinely ignoring the warnings. That is just so not good, because like I said, the users have learned that they just override stuff. So what's the point of what's the point of the warnings? Another thing is, you assumed their complete attention, because it was very, it had to be very precise, and requiring them to be precise. Both of those things are not things that you necessarily can assume. Maybe for flying a plane, okay, yes, you would hope that the pilot is giving you your full attention. However, in a real world, you just have a lot of, you have a lot of stuff going on in a hospital. So those are some mistakes that, that maybe the people who built this software, if they saw it being used and started really thinking about, okay, well, what does this mean as a user of this software, talking to nurses and saying, okay, what could what does this mean to you? What is the real world scenario for using this? And I actually just had to put this in. I left out the one word of this, but a former company I worked for, I won't mention them, but they are a national testing or examinations organization in the US. The COO once said in a meeting that our users are a bunch of something deleted here. And we were actually meeting with some web design and usability consultants when she said this. So, and I bring this up not just because I'm bitter about something someone said 10 years ago, but actually I bring it up because I think that it is so easy to blame a person. And I think that's what happened with this nurse too. Maybe, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know about culpability or anything like that, but I do know that studies have shown that if you blame a person, they become the scapegoat, and then you can say, okay, well, the overall system is fine. It's just this one person who's wrong, and then another person who's wrong, and another person. So it kind of gets the designers of the system off the hook, and so instead of doing the hard work of let's make our system, work for our users, they're just saying, well, our users aren't capable of using this properly. It's their fault. And I guess that works, in both of these cases where the user has to use the software. But what about if they have a choice? All of a sudden, they're going to probably pick the other one that works better for them. And I don't know if other people have heard people say this, but I've heard this a lot over the years. People just saying, I'm not good with technology. I just don't understand how to use it. I'm not good with my phone. I'm not good with the computers. And I read somewhere, and I wish I had the quote. I don't remember exactly. Actually, I cited it myself. Yes, Don Norman, author of The Design of Everyday Things, says maybe it's the technology that's not good with people. Turn that around and say, instead of saying, okay, people can't use our software and they feel bad because they feel like it's a failing on their side, saying, oh yeah, maybe I just need to know something else. I need to learn more about that. And maybe that's true that they do need to learn how to use something, but if you build that learning into the design, or you can or if you just think about your design and saying, okay, I've got people here who they might be nervous about using software. They might be nervous about, okay, clicking on something, how do we help them? And understanding that and just thinking about their perspective, I think is going to really lead to a much a much better user experience for them, which in the end is probably going to mean, more work for you as a developer, more, more sales or more interaction with your site, or whatever it is that you're after. Or maybe it's just that, you're working for a government site and people have to fill out your form. But if you get better data, there's still value in that. One place that I worked with, we made these forms, and we, when we redesigned them, one of our goals was to say, okay, how many people do we call back to ask more information about? And our goal was to limit that, because that costs money. It takes time. It slows the whole process down when we look at have this have bad data coming in because people don't understand what they're supposed to put. And it's not necessarily the technology's fault always. Sometimes it's that the whole concept of what they're supposed to be entering is also confusing to them. So that's another thing that I often see when people say, I'm not good with technology. Like, well, you know how to type, you know how to put your name in the form. You just don't understand why you're supposed to put this information or what they are asking for. So maybe it's not necessarily the technology itself, but the design of the technology isn't making it clear what the website is asking for. So to try to get a handle on how to make your software work well for users, I think it's important to look at your target audience. Define what is your audience, and it's also important to look at who do you want them to be. Those might be those might be two different things. Those might be just more of the same. At Localize, one thing that we have done recently is we did our marketing team did some surveys and looked at who was using our site, looked at our churn rates, and that's when we lose a client, and looked at like who is comfortable with the rates that we charge, and we just looked at all of these different things. We looked into who is using what features of our site, and then we decided based on that okay, we have been building this this great translation tool. Well, it's most effective for people who are either software companies or who have a big software component, like higher education or government entities that also need to reach markets that have more than one language. One example is just we have a school where there's a lot of parents come from a Spanish-speaking country, so their kids in the U.S. they learn English, but the parents never get the chance to learn English. So they were having a really hard time with outreach and engagement with those families. So they started using us, and then those parents started getting more engaged because they were able to send messages and letters home in Spanish instead of English. So once we identified that, oh yes, these are the kind of groups that we want our audience to be, we can start tailoring our software and our marketing experts. Another good quote I really like is, helping a company by focusing on helping their audience. That's how you help the company succeed, is by making sure that, the users of their product their needs are met and addressed. Because if you do that, then they like using the product. They'll recommend it to friends. They'll let you put a case study up on your website. They'll maybe be a reference for someone who's not sure, and then you can build on that. You can say, okay, well, we've built this and it worked really well for them. Why did it work really well? And then so identifying those things and then just keeping that going and keeping that momentum going is a really a great piece of the puzzle of focusing on your users. And sometimes different pieces of your company are going to have different ideas about what you want, who your audience should be, or how you want to reach that audience. The marketers might be like, okay, we need to do all this stuff to get the people to come in. And design is saying, okay, well, we actually need to build something that they want to use once they come here. And getting an alignment on that, I think, is just really important. Like I mentioned at Localize, that's one thing that we have done is to unite those efforts to make sure that the product that we're designing and the users that we're marketing to are, all of that is geared towards the same group of people. And if you want to just market something towards everybody and design something for everyone, that's a laudable goal as well. But just understanding what that is and who, and getting that alignment, I think is just so important, because it helps you get the users who want to use your design, and then they'll be able to use it. Not just sending, we've played around a lot with, okay, do we do Google ads? How much ad spend do we have on various platforms? And, how do we target the right users to get in? So, that's what our marketing team works on, while our design team and then our engineers are saying, okay, now that we get the people coming in, we have to make it a great experience for them. So we just kind of go through, okay, what is it like once they, click on that ad? All right, what are we telling them? How do they onboard? Once they onboard, how do we get them to talk to us? And so we just go through all of those stages so that we can help them be successful with our product. Because if they're successful with our product, they're happy, and we make money. And a big piece of that is, making it easy to use. This is this is a quote, making a solution less complex isn't dumbing it down, it's making it more accessible. Especially, I think this was talking about, oh yeah, this is the new Relic product, which is if you're not familiar, they do a lot of like APM, like application, I know, but basically the analytics on your app and telling you, are your systems running, how are they running, and all that. And when they talked about their design journey, they said, okay, we had two different markets. We had the really complex like sysops people who they just know their stuff and they know what they want to do and they know how to do it. And so we just need all these advanced tools to let them, configure that themselves. But they also said, you know what? That's great, and we don't want to ruin that experience, but we also want to make the experience work for like a junior developer who's at a new job, and their company says, hey, why don't you figure out how we can find out some analytics about how our app is doing? And they don't have 20 years of sysops experience, so they're not going to understand all the ins and outs. So they started thinking about, okay, how do we make that simplified, how do we make that simplified user interface, and how do we get it to something that the users understand how to use? So and they got a lot of credit. It was some debates in their company because they were saying, oh, we're just dumbing it down, we need to be this this big complicated tool. And they said, well, yeah, we should have all that stuff, but we need to help people get into that tool. And then once they get, they've been using our tool for a year, they all of a sudden they like understand a lot more, then they start using the more advanced things. So and when we talk about making it easy to use, it's often good to remember that engineers approach problems logically, usually, hopefully, but that's kind of how we're taught when we're developing software. We think about logic, we think about how do we design things, and not just the user interface design, but how does the code work. So there's just a lot of logic in what we do. The people using your site generally don't approach their problems logically. They just want things to work. They might they might just want to, they just want to click on it and get get their product ordered, or they might type who knows what in the search and just expect it to find what they're thinking about. And even if what they're thinking about doesn't logically make sense, it makes sense to them. So how do you understand that? One way is dealing with user errors. Way back in the we're talking about the nurse and needing precision. Even in smaller cases, people aren't precise. This is a real error that I got when I typed in my phone number. It says this is a required field. Well, yeah, it's a required field. I saw the star there. I put my phone number in. Well, what was wrong? Well, they didn't want me to put the dashes in. Why is, you're requiring me to understand that and to do that, when how easy is it to put a couple dashes in, count to 10 digits or whatever, however many digits a phone number is in the particular locality, and then put dashes in or not. I mean, this is not something that really should be put on the user, but so often it is. And I mean, this is, a really minor example. Oops, I missed one here. But the same thing, asking for the phone and then saying, oh, okay, well, yeah, this one, wanted the dashes, this one didn't, or maybe they both didn't, but they're again, they're cutting people off. At least this time I was able to see, okay, well, I can logically guess that I'm missing two numbers, so I probably need to take out the dashes. Some people might not do that. They might just like click, 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 save, like, why isn't this working, and just get upset. So very simple. Sometimes it's a very simple change to, to handle just stripping out the dashes as the user types them, or formatting as they go. Today's technology, that's not necessarily, as challenging as it was like, 20 years ago when I was dealing with, who knows what JavaScript frameworks, if there were back then. But yeah, so yeah, helping the users correct their mistakes is, I think, really important. because they're going to make mistakes. And this is, yes, this is actually an error that I got. I can't remember where, but you know, I had no idea what to do with that. Nor could I do anything. I could X out of it and click OK. So, well, something happened and it wasn't right. So yeah, guiding our users through the journey of using our software, yeah, is really important. Not just when they're making errors, but you know, if we want to tell them stuff. This, I don't know, I just got this off the internet somewhere, so I haven't been there, but I've definitely seen stores like this or places where, yeah, there's just so much. I actually designed a site that in theory, you know, conceptually look like this. Well, I didn't design it. There wasn't design. There was maintenance by me, and the person in charge just kept saying, "Okay, people keep entering the wrong thing. You know, can you just make the text bigger? You know, make it red. You know, put it there twice. You know," and then you just ended up with like all these instructions that basically look like these signs, you know, to the users saying, you know, oh, free deliveries, pick up your order 10 to 4. Oh, deliveries hours 10 to 4. Call this number. You know, max 5 customers, fresh yeast is here. You know, just, you know, that's obviously not what we were saying because we were collecting data for something totally different. But, you know, you kind of get the point where, okay, you know, and finally we got to the point where it's like, okay, this is not working. You know, every time someone makes an error, we just add another message. You know, we just put up another sign, you know, metaphorical sign on the window and saying that you have to do this. And that didn't work very well. So we actually got to a point where, you know, I convinced some stakeholders to like, let's redesign this. Let's look at it. And oh yeah, my gosh, it was just night and day. The difference when we thought about, okay, what are users, what do they actually want? And we found out we were just making them type, you know, ridiculous amounts of data that we already had. And we knew better than they did some of the answers to these questions that we were asking them. But you know, basically what had happened was, you know, back in the days when they filled out a paper order form and, you know, mailed it in, you know, we essentially just took all the things on the paper order form and put it on a website. And then we realized, well, no, that doesn't really work very well because we have all this information that we can use to guide the user. So they would say, okay, I'm in New York. Oh, okay, well, we know some things about our, you know, people who are ordering this from New York. And then we can say, okay, then we can guide them through that. So we did that. And yeah, you know, the amount of good data we were collecting, it just, you know, was huge. And all the time spent calling people and saying, okay, what did you really mean when you typed this in? So by eliminating that, you know, we made our users happy, you know, that we got all these compliments about, oh yeah, this was such a great experience now compared to what it used to be. And then it also made our employees happy because they weren't spending time doing like tedious work of calling, you know, calling people on the phone or emailing them and trying to find out, okay, what was really supposed to happen here. Now, one really tricky thing is when you're thinking about, okay, what are users doing, is solving the right problem for those users. And as I kind of alluded to when we started, you know, like looking at this form and saying, okay, what are the users really after? You know, what do we know? What do they know? And what is the actual problem? You know, the problem isn't that, you know, they can't type right or they don't know this information. And, you know, we kind of just went down that. We kept asking why. At my company now, I think we sometimes talk about the 5 whys or something like that. But basically the idea is, you know, well, why are they doing, you know, why did the user do this? You know, why are we presenting this in this way? And just get down to, you know, the root of the problem. And then once you've identified that, you can start exploring the solutions. You know, and then saying, okay, now we understand what the user really is troubled with or what we really want to get at. And then we start talking over, okay, here's potential ways to solve it. And I guess this is kind of a repeat of what what I talked about before, is not just, you know, correct your errors, you know, make it easy. You know, I don't know why, you know, unsubscribing from an email cannot be easily undone. But I think that generally speaking, anything you do on a computer should be easily undone, or at least have a method of undoing it. at least for a small period, soft deletes and that kind of thing are easy enough to handle. Don't delete something for real until a week's gone by, or whatever it is. But so just some of those things behind the scenes, if the user doesn't even see, excuse me, could be really useful to making their experience better. So you don't have that, oh no, I click delete and you say, oh, sorry, all your data is gone. They're like, oh no, I didn't mean to. And it totally depends on use case, but just thinking about, okay, well, what was the user, what was the user thinking? What were they doing? What was going through their head at that point? And but to think about all that, it's one thing to just start thinking about it. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about what they could be thinking, and then that sounds a little repetitive, thinking about what they're thinking. But anyway, once you start thinking about those scenarios of who your users are, you can start investigating their actual behavior once you have something out there that they're using. And some tools that I've used recently, or at least Localize that we use, is Full Story and Heap. But I know there's a lot out there that Google Analytics and things like that help you help record what's going on your page, how your users are using it, and just start investigating that behavior. Because in the real world, we can see clues like this. Okay, obviously somebody didn't want the black beans at the top, and they really liked this 4 for $5 special, so they abandoned those. Or for example here, it's very clear that people want to walk on that diagonal line right there. So there's actually, that happens so much, there's actually a name for it, the desire path. This is the way people actually want to go versus the way the designers told them they probably should go. But you have to be worried, you have to also, this seems like, okay, maybe they over-engineered this. I might just be saying this because this is a rival university to the one from my hometown. I don't know, but either way, it's I always say don't overthink or over-engineer for it, because sometimes you're not going to meet everybody's needs. You can get really close, but there's always going to be like an outlier, and maybe it's just not worth it to solve it. Maybe the solution for that person is to have a way for them to email you or contact support easily. A lot of places I've been like that. It's like, okay, well, we've hit the end of the road. You're a very extreme edge case. We can't spend $50,000 to program for you, but we have it's a lot easier to hire someone in our call center to help you out, or whatever it is. But yeah, it's hard to strike that balance about bending to the will of every user and then making something that that actually works well for them. So yeah, like I said, there's just a lot of tools out there. You can make homegrown tools or just look through logs. Another thing that I'm a big proponent of is looking at support cases that come in, because those obviously have a lot of information, going back and forth and seeing, how do your customer support engineers, how do they respond to people? What are they telling them to do? And then, what are the problems that are coming in? And then from that, you can you can get some really good information. But there's just so much data out there, and there's just more and more tools that allow you to analyze it. So it does take time, but I honestly think it's some time well spent that can really help you hone your product so that you get something that is really accepted and really delights your users. So, I've talked a lot about what we're doing for our users and designing that. So once you come up with all of these ideas, you've analyzed your data, you've you've seen what errors people are making, and you have this great idea about how do we solve it. At some point, you're probably going to need to get some sort of stakeholder approval. And that can be hard sometimes for a developer our engineer or product team to go in there and say, okay, we need to sell our executives on this. So this is just some guidance that I can give if you haven't done this a lot, is to say, be sure of yourself, because once you've done all that research, and you understand that helps you understand why you want to do what you want to do. And that gives you a good argument to say, okay, this is, we did all this research. We understand what our users are doing. We understand what ways that's not what's working and what's not working for them. And so you can craft that argument and say, okay, and we want to, take on this initiative. It's going to take 2 months and 3 engineers' time, and we're going to get huge benefits because the last point, when the user wins, the company wins. We're making a great user experience. It's going to make it easier for us. It's going to, reduce customer support calls, or it's going to, it's going to involve, we're going to have a better sign up rate, or we're going to have, less churn, or we're going to be able to charge people more because we have a more advanced product. Whatever it is, all of those things are, meeting your company's goals. So I think that, it's not an either or. A lot of times some executives will think that way, that it's like, okay, well, we're spending money. Why? And it's like, okay, we're spending money to make money. So yeah, just a little quick summary here, knowing your users, solving their actual problems, understanding that they're not precise, they're often chaotic in their use of your product, and using software for what it's good for, helping correct errors. Computers are powerful. So I want you to just get confident and build great things by understanding your users. So once again, I'm Derek Binkley, the engineering lead with Localize, coming to you remotely from Madison, Wisconsin, USA, where it looks like we're just starting to get some big fat snowflakes. I don't know if it'll stick around till Christmas, but it's starting. So here's my information. If you want to keep in touch, I'd love to chat more about that. And then in the future, and I'll see if there's any questions or comments or anything like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't have any questions per se, but when I was visiting Austin, Texas, I remembered I had this situation where there was an iPad and you had to order from the iPad because it was still kind of COVID rules. But obviously I still have a UK number. But the iPad would only let you order if you had a phone number, and the phone number had to be a United States phone number. So I just used my old one from 5-6 years ago, but some poor person had to get some text from their talkers to just so I could process my order, and the team behind the in the van just had no answer for it. It was just, you need to have a US phone number or otherwise you can't order food. So that was a pretty good example of if things go wrong, have a way around that for your end user.
Right, exactly. And in that case, they could say, okay, do we want to build our software so that it can handle any number in the US, or I mean, any number in the world? Or do we just say, okay, train the people behind the counter to say, oh yeah, I'm sorry, you can't use the iPad, but I'll take your order for you. I mean, that might, that might be a simple solution for someone, to have them just, empower them to do that. But when it's very frustrating when software locks people out. So oh yeah, Suzanne, I see you have your hand raised. Thank you.
I'm a front-end developer, and so I would be one of the ones helping create the forms to collect this information. And I've been in the commerce section for a long time, so I haven't been allowed to do a lot. I was wondering, what front-end languages do you use in your company? Do you use React? Do you recommend a certain stack for good response time for checking for errors?
Yes. So we are actually we are starting to we're just now starting to use React. We have a lot our core of our product was built about 7-ish years ago. So a lot of it is built in Backbone, which is kind of a precursor to React. So and honestly, like we because of using that and then moving to React, but trying to get them both to interact. One thing I find that we're doing is that, yeah, React works great, but we also have a lot of just kind of vanilla JavaScript. So we end up doing a lot of like just, document dot, query, whatever, select by ID and, those kind of things. So yeah, I think that I mean that's what we use.
Great, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I see. I just saw your chat message too about the same thing. So thanks for your question there. Yes. Does anybody else want to ask or further the conversation or?
I have one more question. Ooh,
Okay.
I'll
Sure.
wait.
It looks like Jamie raised her hand, then I'll come back to you. So Jamie.
Hello, hello. Quite an interesting question. Where do you draw the line between the role of what a UX architect, UX designer kind of like does versus what sort of like a front end engineer might do?
Yes. Yeah, it's really tricky, and there's definitely quite a bit of overlap. In my experience, a lot of times it's just been based on who is there, to be honest.
The resource available, right?
Right, exactly. So like right now, at Localize, we have one of our graphics designers. She went to school for like UI UX. I love your dog, by the way.
Yeah, he's I've got food near me, so he's
oh, that explains. Yeah, very interested. But our current graphics designer, she has this UI UX background, so she reaches a lot more into like she's doing a lot more of the stuff that I talked about in this talk than like some graphics designers might be, specifically, they're just doing the design after someone else tells them what to do. They're more about make it look good, not doing that user experience. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it. But I've definitely been on projects where there's a front end engineer who really gets UX, and so they kind of like reach out into that UX space too. Or there's just somebody who is like that's their whole thing. Yeah, so it's really hard to draw that line. I don't have any hard and fast rules. I've seen it done so many different ways. I think the biggest thing, as long as you're doing it, you did, and you're spending the time with it. That's the most important thing to me on projects.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. And Suzanne, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. I was wondering how, once you come up with these changes that you wanted to make to your app, what processes did you undertake? Did you take them incrementally, or did you just have a giant big, let's overhaul everything? And because like I said, I work in commerce, so everything is must do now. There's very little planning. But so, for a software company, I was wondering how much planning goes into this.
Yeah, quite a bit. So, I'll just back up a little bit. When I worked for the big examinations company, we had a very different life cycle because we gave an exam like 3 times a year. So we did all this work and planning, and then something happened. And then either it went well or it didn't. And then, we'd spend 3 more months work and plan. So that was, I think, very, very kind of stressful because, you had very few opportunities to actually try out, what you've built. But now at Localize, one of the nice things that is there is that we don't have those big events. So I actually also worked on a project where we did things for another stressful timing was I did check-ins for like running races. So I helped build an app that where they like scanned people's like barcodes when they came in to like line up for the race. And obviously we got one chance. We couldn't, there were times where like I was on the phone like helping someone like get the last person checked in before they could blow the whistle and start the race, and like that was seriously stressful. I'm much more like where we're doing it incrementally, and we actually do it both ways at Localize, depending on what. And this is kind of true of a lot of the things. Given the opportunity, we kind of, it depends on what we're doing. Sometimes some changes make a lot of sense, if you can incrementally improve. But other times it's like, okay, well, we have this one thing ready to go out, and then we thought, it's not going to make sense to give the users the ability to import data via Google Drive if they can't export. It's just going to confuse them. So we actually said, okay, well, let's wait until we build both and have the data going both ways to Google Drive. And then we said, okay, now we're going to release that integration. So, it's like so many things, it's a judgment call.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. See if there's any more chat messages. Yeah. Yeah, any more questions or just comments or anybody else's experiences they want to share?
I'm not sure if there's any in the office that I can see. We've all spread out a bit. Sorry, we've also got the cleaners are in, so they're hoovering, vacuuming. Of course, you have to put yourself on mute so that it's not too distracting. Oh,
that's okay. Yes, I know it's it's a lot later where you're at. Yeah, I can see it's dark behind you there. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's not too late. It's like 7 o'clock. Yeah, that's everything. I mean, thank you so much for coming along and talking to us. It was honestly, it's a lot of stuff that I've had experienced as a user, so it's really cool to hear the other side.